SecondWatch. So, so I just go through the, oops, there we go. Go through the agenda. So one of the things we want to talk about a little bit with enterprise management for the cloud is just talk about a little bit about the problem statement of what enterprises are encountering and that type of stuff with the cloud. You know, kind of some pitfalls, some best practices that we've seen, and really introduce SecondWatch. SecondWatch is, and I'll get into another slide here about what SecondWatch is. You know, hopefully you've heard a lot about us at this conference and from that perspective, and I'll go into a little detail of our background. And then I'm going to go into a product demo. So we launched a product this week that really helps you visualize and manage and deploy in the enterprise CloudFormation templates and really help you get control around auditing and monitoring and that type of stuff up in the cloud. So let me go to the next slide. There we go. So let me tell you a little bit about SecondWatch. So SecondWatch has been around for about 2.5 years. We've done over 300 projects of moving people from their data centers into the cloud from that perspective. So we have a deep knowledge of AWS services, and basically we've done a lot of things with AWS from that perspective. So we have basically a very deep staff on people who've been certified by AWS, and we also, my area is the software, so we have two main products that we're doing. One is 2W Insight, which really works on billing and help you understand your AWS bill. And then the other one we just launched is 2W Atlas, which again, like I said, takes your CloudFormation templates, visualizes them, and helps you deploy those and manage those. And I'll even show you direct integration with CloudTrail that was actually introduced earlier today by Andy. So let me talk a little bit about enterprise and the cloud. So basically today, there's a unique challenge with what the cloud is doing to the enterprise, where it used to take 8 weeks, 10 weeks or something like that to deploy a machine in a data center. Basically, business units are actually asking IT departments to do this quickly and cost efficiently. They know that they can deploy an environment up in the Amazon cloud in a few minutes. So what they're doing is they're really stressing the enterprise IT group into how do I do this quickly, how do I do it fast, but we also want to make sure we manage our costs from that perspective. But one of the things we found doing our work is a lot of times enterprise lacks the in-house expertise in the cloud, at least right now. And so how can we bring that to bear? So both through our professional services and what I'll show you a little later in our products of how can we make that simple and give it a nice visual view so anybody from a business person to an IT person can understand it. And then the other thing that we found is, I can change security groups, I could do other things up in the cloud, where before I had to go into a secure data center to do that kind of stuff. Now all I need is a key and an access and I can go up and do it in the cloud. So how can we start working in a product or some type of audit role around that? And again, I'll show that in our product atlas of how we do that and integrate with CloudTrail to actually make it so that you can do a SOX audit from that perspective. So one of the things I want to do is, instead of me talking about the pitfalls and best practices, I'd like to introduce Jason Foster, who is actually our VP of Engineering. His team is the one who's actually been out there doing those 300 deployments, and I want to hand it over to you to really talk about those pitfalls and best practices that we found.
Thanks, Joel. So out of those 300 projects, roughly 50 of those, it's really loud to me, maybe it's not loud to you guys. About 50 of those were really enterprise focused. And so when Joel and I were strategizing about this class and kind of what information did we want to share with the audience, obviously we have a product focus to that and really how to solve the problem, but I think it's important to understand what is the problem and identifying what that problem is. And so I kind of categorize those into the three main areas that you see there. Infrastructure, the usage of it, the waterfall design approach that traditional IT has had. We're talking about procurement of IT and how you staff and build that organization. And then the credentials component listed first there. So if you think about your traditional IT organization today, it's probably siloed in 3 or 4 different areas, right? You probably have a network architect or engineering organization that has access to just those devices. And the reason they have those devices is because when something happens at 3 a.m. and the CIO gets a phone call, they want to make sure that their name's not the one that's next on the list, right? And so what they're doing is they're trying to take the area of responsibility or accountability that they have in the organization, and they're trying to put this like cage around it so that if anything happens in there, I know it was one of my guys that did it, and so it's okay, I trust them. But I surely don't trust the server guys. I'm not going to let the server guys log into a network, Cisco switch and start implementing CIOS commands, right? And the server guys are the same way. They're like, absolutely not are the network guys going to log into a server and configure an IIS setting for my application. And so what you saw or what you see is a behavior of protectiveness around those different verticals. And so the self-service component that AWS brings to the table that Joel identifies as great value add to your organization, they actually introduce a lot of challenges. And when you think about the master credential as an example, the master credential has access to everything. It has access to the network config, the VPC, IPsec VPN tunnel configurations, security groups and firewall rules that are inside the network that actually access, what ports and protocols can talk to which ingress and egress points, right? And so you have to make, and so the concern there is, well, who is it that's actually getting access to that master key? Is it the application guy that got his credit card because he wanted a server really quick and did that self-service great Amazon thing and he punched his credit card in and now he's spinning up network infrastructure in the cloud and putting my corporate IP out in the cloud? And is that the person who's got the master creds? Or do we give it to the server guy who logs in, or gal that logs into the SAN, SAN head, the NAS, and actually configures storage? Who gets that, right? And so there's a lot of challenges organizations have around how to structure that and who gets access to it. And then when you think about the difficulty of revoking access, the same thing applies. So if you have access to, let's just say a Cisco switch, maybe you've got an EMC SAN, and then you've got maybe an Active Directory deployed, so you've got server-level network authentication for that. Then when someone quits or you need to revoke access for whatever reason, you've got to go touch 5 or 6 systems to do that, right? And so there's an administrative overhead, there's an administrative burden with actually facilitating the revoking of a permission. Well, with the master cred, it's just one permission, right? It's the master credential. It's the same access, or it's the same credential that has access to everything. I just remove that and then they lose access to everything. So it's actually a challenging conversation. I've been in front of several customers in the enterprise space, specifically the Fortune 50 space, and they'll bring all the VPs to the table that represent these silos I'm talking about, and it'll be like an arm wrestling match. I mean, it'll get heated and it'll get debate get started. It's very interesting how the cloud is actually disruptive to your business, right? Because the whole idea is it's not. The whole idea is that it's seamless and it's the self-service and agility, right? Those are all the value adds, but it's actually disruptive if you don't know how to consume it. You have to know how to consume the cloud in the enterprise space. And so what are some of the solutions I've got on the right-hand side of the slide there? Absolutely best practice, 100%, you've got to use identity and access management. You just have to do it, right? And even if you say, I'm going to create an IAM account, but I'm just going to go ahead and give that IAM account access to everything, then fine, then just do that. But don't use the master cred. Use the IAM access or the IAM roles to facilitate that. And then you can actually go in and create strategies for how to create IAM accounts to solve the network level access issue, or the server level access issue, or maybe the CDN CloudFront issue where you maybe only want certain people doing that. Create IAM roles for that, right? So I've got a best practices section that I'm going to go through in a little more detail around what that looks like. And then the infrastructure issues. It gets back to the 3 a.m. phone call, right? It's all hands on deck. You've got a database guy, you got a network guy, you've got this big war room spun up, everyone's sitting at a conference table. Man, they've got application logging going, they've got network sniffers fired up. I mean, you can just imagine what it looks like, right? You've got that tier 1 critical outage system down. And the reason is, well, why do you do that? Well, there's an outage. Okay, well, why is there an outage? What happened that caused the outage? More than likely, 90% of the time, it's some capacity of something that caused it. You ran out of RAM. My application went on this crazy, spooled up, 10,000 threads, crunched in all my RAM, and so I have a capacity issue at the RAM level. Maybe it's at the disk level. Maybe I had some query that ran crazy because someone was doing a select star in a SQL statement and just ate up all my disk I/O in my disk subsystems. Some of the guys are laughing in the room. You've done that. You've been there. So how does that change when you think about the solutions in the cloud? And the whole idea is the dynamic capacity components to infrastructure. So great, so you run out of RAM, you understand what your RAM requirements are. You don't have to go try to provision new RAM, you just delete the old one. You don't care anymore, right? So you have to get away from this, I've got something physical and it's tangible, my heartstrings are on it, I racked that bad boy, I took it out of the box and screwed the hard drive in it and I put it in the rack and I'm just so attached to that physical thing, I don't want to let go of it. And that's a human nature component. But when you think about the dynamic components of the cloud, that has to go away. You have to change your whole mindset, how you think about troubleshooting something. It's like, oh, well, I think something's going on with the server in the RAM. Great, shoot it, kill it, delete it. Who cares? I'm going to spin another one up in 5 seconds anyway. By the time you get your logs and your tools installed that try to figure out what the issue was, it's going to be resolved, right? I'm going to have the infrastructure. So you've got to change your mindset around how you consume the cloud. You know, some of the examples here are using snapshotting. Anybody here participate in game day on Monday, or on Tuesday rather? Really cool thing. So what they did is they said, go build us an environment in the game day session, and then go break it. And so what most of the game day participants did was they're like, crap, someone's going to come in and break my stuff. I know they are, because that's the objective of this class. So they used snapshotting, and they created snapshots of their environment and said, look, if they go blow it up, I don't care. I'm just going to reconstitute it from nothing in 10 seconds. I'm going to store these over in an S3 bucket, probably in another region across the world where they'll never find in the amount of time they have to break my app. And that's how they did it. So why wouldn't you want to build that same bulletproof infrastructure in your production enterprise environment? They're doing it in labs at reInvent for a game day. But I want to touch a little bit around the scalability. Traditionally, you would buy servers, and you would probably put a specific amount of RAM in them, because you went through some capacity exercise and you understood what the application requirements were and the OS requirements. And then you always knew that if you needed more, I would just go buy more RAM, right? I've got 4 slots in my server. There are 2 gig sticks in it right now. If I need to double, I just take those out and I go put 4 gigs in. I just doubled my RAM capacity. But you did that as a design component. You knew you were going to do that. What we're saying that you do in the cloud is you don't do that. Instead, so that's what we call scaling vertically. Instead, you scale horizontally. So instead of adding more RAM to a server to solve the problem, just add more servers. Right? It's the same price. So if you're looking at the Amazon cost structure, you know, 1 CPU, 2 gig, same cost as 2 CPU, or twice the cost as 2 CPU, 4 gig. It's a linear structure. So there's no difference in scaling up or scaling out. So why wouldn't you scale out from an architecture and infrastructure perspective? And so it's the whole mindset of getting into the cloud and consuming this technology in a completely different way. And we're hoping that Joel's demonstration of Alice is really going to kind of blow your mind a little bit when you start thinking about how you consume technology in the enterprise space with these design considerations in play. And then the whole idea of the waterfall design, right? I mean, everyone knows that, right? Your marketing guy or gal comes to you, need a marketing web server. Oh, it's going to take 6 weeks. You've heard this song and dance from the cloud, proposition stories before. And so how do you change that mindset? So before, what you would do to answer that problem is, because your CIO would be, jumping down your neck, is that we can't tell them 6 weeks, guys. We've got to tell them 2 days. Great, then I'm going to go over-provision my data center. To solve your business problem, I'm going to go buy 20x server, and they're just going to be sitting there, and as soon as you say you need one, I'm going to give it to you, right? And so that solution just kind of goes completely away in the cloud because you're using dynamic. You're using real-time, on-demand infrastructure, right? So I need a new server. Great. I'm going to go do that, and I'm going to do it in a matter of seconds or minutes, depending on what you're trying to do. So from a best practice perspective, we talked a little bit about IAM roles, identity and access management, and the control of that. And some of the ways that we've seen enterprise be successful with deploying IAM are going to be around either specific projects, right? So you have a project team, and maybe they're a cross-functional project team with multiple skill sets on that team. Or maybe it's by application type or by application, right? So you have, line of business app A, tier 1, critical system, and I'm going to build a team to support that app. So I'm going to create IAM accounts to support that. Or you could go back to your old way, and we actually see a lot of enterprises do that. And the reason they do it is because it already fits kind of some of their existing structure today. They'll go back and they'll create an IAM group called network admins, and then they'll go in and give the groups an access. And the reason is it fits into their existing change control policies, fits into the existing operation model they have. So it's pretty seamless from that perspective. And then track and manage the activity. Joel talked a little bit about CloudTrail. We're actually going to see a demonstration here today of being able to track access to what the users are doing, who did it, why they, or when they did it, and where they did it from. So it's going to be extremely interesting. And then the utilization of tags. You guys have seen tagging before. Amazon announced they're tagging all services now. Use those tags. They're there for a reason, right? They're there for scope creep and understanding cost. So you think back 10 years ago when virtualization hit your data center, and you had virtualization sprawl, right? So your OS licensing count went from 100 because you had 100 physical servers to 1,000 because you put 10 servers on each box or whatever your scale was that you could get VMs per server, right? So you had that sprawl. The same thing's happening in the cloud. It's self-service, right? So how do you manage that sprawl? How do you manage the reporting of that, the approval of that, the costing of that? Who's paying the check? All these questions come into play in the enterprise. And what the communication we're trying to give you today is that you need to think about that now before you actually get in the cloud and start doing that self-service component to it. You need to have a methodology. You need to have a strategy around control and compliance. Who's going to do what in the cloud and why are they going to do it? Who's going to have access and authorization to allow those to do? And then how am I going to report against it using the tagging that Amazon provides? And then finally, and this is going to be a great segue for Joel, and I'll get off of here and give you guys something exciting to do, is CloudFormation, right? What is CloudFormation and how do I consume that, right? And so it's around creating reference architectures and reference implementations of technology. And the reason I say it that way is because it's very specific. It's not just deploying a server the same way every time. It's about deploying IAMs the same way every time. It's about deploying network configurations the same way every time. It's about bundling all of those components into a single script or into a single interface, into a document that I can then go put in my source control. And I can say, I executed CloudFormation 1A, and then I can go back to my source control. I know exactly what CloudFormation 1A is. So when your audit and control comes around and goes, what are the considerations around that design? I want to understand the auditability of that design, and how do you know that didn't change? Well, I go back to my source control because I keep my JSON scripts in my source control. I can tell you exactly how it was built. Now all we have to do is bridge the gap from when it was built to what changed, right? So I'd like to bring Joel back up on stage to talk about some of the cool things that we're doing with Atlas on how to bridge that gap between what you have and how do you know what it changed. And come on up.
Yeah, it's an awesome segue.
Thanks for having me.
Yep, cool. So Jason obviously has done a lot of deployments, a lot of things in the cloud, and on AWS platform in that perspective. So with all that, what is the path ahead? Where is enterprise going with management and from that perspective? So one of the things that we see is enterprises are, and you heard it from Andy this morning, are we going to go to data centers or are we going to go in the cloud? From that perspective. I'm a little bit biased. I think everybody's going to go to the cloud. I think it's a great place to be. I think the other thing is if you really look at what's happening with the cloud, and it's reminiscent. I'm kind of old, so I remember back when PCs started showing up on desktops instead of mainframes, and from that perspective, I haven't seen a transition of IT this large since then. So lots of things are happening. It's basically the cloud, and specifically AWS, is changing how people think about infrastructure, technology, IT, servers, all that kind of stuff. And it's going to continue to change. It's just started at the tip of the iceberg right now. But one of the things, there's a lot of uncertainty still yet. And again, I'm probably a little biased on my views, but I really believe that the only confusion in the future is really, what are you going to do with all the money you save once you go to the cloud from that perspective? So that's what I kind of see as a path ahead from my perspective, from enterprise management, and how do I get our large companies into the cloud. So as Jason mentioned, and that was a good segue from CloudFormation, because one of the things we really do is, how do I start managing this stuff? Jason mentioned about CloudFormation templates. There are lots of lines of JSON script. So is there a better way to do that? So let me introduce a little bit to our product we launched this week. It's 2W Atlas. It's really about, how do I design these architectures that are going out? How do I deploy them? How do I monitor them? And then finance always comes into this, right? How do I report out to make sure that we have the right bills paid, the right amounts paid, and all those types of things? So that's really what 2W Atlas does, is it allows you to visually do this. And so what we can do is we can take CloudFormation templates, you drag and drop them on top of our application, we'll visualize those. Not in a really complex way that takes you 10 hours to figure out what I just visualized, but something simple so that everything from an IT person to a business person can understand what that looks like and how it works. And I'll show you that in a minute here. Let's make sure my machine is running. Build and deploy quickly. Basically, how do I do this? Because one of the things I started off the presentation, what business teams are asking of IT is how do I quickly deploy this stuff out? How do I do that? And so again, I'll show you that with Atlas. And then, like Jason mentioned and I mentioned around CloudTrail, how do I audit this? How do I figure out what happened? And then also, how do I allocate cost? How do I do the right costing, do the estimates, figure out what you spent, and from that perspective. So that's really what I'm going to focus on with the demo. So this is just the live demo. So again, what we're going to do is show design for the enterprise, visualize the CloudFormation, estimating costs, monitoring cloud architecture, and deployment. So let me switch over here. And it is a total live demo. So I'll give myself a pass, right? In case something doesn't work right. So basically, what we're doing is 2W Atlas is a software as a service. We're in beta right now. And so basically what it is you log on with your credentials and you get access to your environment. The first thing that you see here is you don't see things like AWS accounts, you don't see that type of stuff, you see more things around your business units. Because a strong belief from my perspective is what business people and IT people, corporate IT people look at is what's my business unit using? What are we doing? I don't really care if there's one account, 3 accounts, whatever. It's really about how's that organized with my corporation. And so in this case, what you see is this is the departmental page that allows you to see the different departments and what's deployed there. So if you look over here, what we're doing is we're looking at the cost. We can actually project the costs out from that perspective. So we're tracking what's going on in that department. So we're rolling things up. We're projecting it out. We'll give a month over month. But this is interesting over here. In this particular department, I have 5 CloudFormation templates. I have 5 deployments that are either in running state or in the process of ready to be deployed. There's 2 up there. You see red and green. The red is actually saying that I have an alert. That means we detected a CloudTrail event coming in and something happened, like somebody opened a port where they shouldn't open a port from that perspective. So we alerted on that, and green means everything's running fine, at least from the infrastructure point of view. And down here you can actually see a little RSS feed that says what are the important things that are happening with your environments and from that perspective. So if I was to drop into, let me go. I'm actually going to go and text one of our engineers back in Seattle to go and make a change. You saw the one environment over here is running green. It takes about 10 minutes or so for the event to come through. So I'm going to go and text him right now so that you'll actually see, while I'm talking up here, the event change. So you should see that. And again, this is the live part. You should see that turn from green to red from that perspective. But if I was to go and look at the actual deployment site, what I'm looking at now is the detail level down. So I'm looking at the costing just for that. So as you can see, this is kind of designed both for an IT person and also for a business person to go in and look at the costs and from that perspective. But you notice on the detail, I actually get another menu. So I can start visualizing. And the visualization, this is our visualization of a CloudFormation template. I don't know, it looks a little better than JSON script, I think. From that perspective. And so this is actually marrying up with what's actually running up in the cloud. So what we can do is I can actually click on these icons, and it will go out to the AWS and actually pull the information from that perspective. So you can see monitoring live what's happening in the system from that perspective. The next thing I want to talk about is these are the actual events that are happening. So as you can see, these are all CloudTrail events. We analyze those events, we determine what they are, and you'll notice from perspective, you see yellow, informational. Informational is, we started or stopped a instance. That's just informational for an audit log. But you go down to the red, and all of a sudden you start seeing things, an alert come through. Well, if you notice, somebody opened up 3398 or 89. Anybody know what that port is? RDP. So basically on a public-facing website or public-facing network, somebody opened up an RDP port. That's probably not a good thing. They opened it up to the world. So what we're able to do is track who did it. In this particular case, who did it is a user ID named product development. And I know when, I know where, I know from that perspective. So one of the things that we do with CloudTrail is we actually save all that information away for you from that perspective. So that when you get a SOX audit or something like that, you'll be able to actually go back and have all that detail. We save it in your context, so it's your data. You can keep it and from that perspective. So that's the eventing. And basically, if people know CloudFormation, this is, we have logs around what's happening with that deployment from that perspective. So this is a running environment that's happening out there. So let me jump into, how do I deploy these things? What do I do? So if you see, again, this is a CloudFormation template. And so what we've done is, back to what Jason was saying, is what we've seen with enterprise, what they like to do is put together reference architectures or cloud architectures. And this is what I want to deploy. It's been passed through all my security, passed through all my audits. I know that that's what we want to deploy. So this is a way to start collecting all those CloudFormation templates together and then present that out to your user group. We have customers that actually want to present this out to the business units and say, this is what you're allowed to deploy. Go deploy it from that perspective. And so this is an easy way to visualize that information from that perspective. And again, you can go in and click on different things to see what's there and that type of stuff. You'll also see up here, we go through and look at that CloudFormation, and with our knowledge of what the costs are and what regions and all that kind of stuff, we can go in and say, we think this is going to cost about $357 a month if you go and deploy this environment. That's really in the default. I mean, obviously, with an auto-scaling group, there will be some variation with how many servers and what load is on it. But there's another interesting thing that happened, and actually we discovered this as we were doing it. As Jason said, is we do a lot with different companies and from that perspective. And so this is a CloudFormation template actually of one of our customers. And anybody notice what's going on with this section down here? Is there a problem, you think? With those three things that are grouped together, not connected to anything else? Basically, there's an error in the CloudFormation template. It specified a missing subnet. So basically what we found out is our professional services people would take probably 2, 3, 4 days to figure that out once they went and deployed, because this is like a 2,800 line JSON script from that perspective, and it's just a text flag in there. So what they were able to do is easily go out and figure out, hey, look, there's this thing's not connected. So we were able to go in and check it and fix it within a few minutes. And then this is obviously the fixed version. So are people familiar with CloudFormation templates and that type of stuff? So one of the other things that's really interesting with CloudFormation, so this is a basic LAMP stack. So what we look at in 2W Atlas is the idea is these are the things that are prepared, but there's a lot of defaults, there's a lot of configuration and that type of stuff. So we go from a ready CloudFormation template to what we call launch or stage status. And so what that means is when I go into prepare to launch, so if you're happy with the defaults and you don't want to do anything with that, you could just actually go out and call it whatever. Let's say live demo from that perspective. And I'll stick it in the corporate IT group for right now. And so, but that's what my configuration is. But let's say I go back and I want to modify these details. So what I did is I went back and I said, hey, there's a whole bunch of parameters within a CloudFormation template. So instead of you going to figure out in the JSON and all that kind of stuff what the defaults are and all those types of things, we can actually dynamically generate this dialog that allows me to choose, okay, what AZs do I want to run this in? What are the web parameters, all that kind of stuff. And then when I go to stage it, so I'll just go and stage it out. And what will happen is it will take me right to that. So now I'm ready to deploy it. So basically what it does is it saves away that configuration so that I know that's the configuration that I'm going to go and deploy, and from that perspective. So let's go back. The live demo. Oh, haven't seen the event yet. So basically, with CloudTrail, what happened is that green would turn to red, but there's a little delay in when we send it up to CloudTrail, make the change, and from that perspective. So that's, in a lot of nutshell, that's really what 2W Atlas is about, and from that perspective. So let me jump back to the presentation. So that's the live demo.